What better way to start the month of Halloween than with a man who dresses up like a skeleton bird? Elden Ring's Ravenmount assassin is a bloody finger who puts on his Deathbird costume to go hunt down and unalive his tarnished brethren. And just like the Dark Knight he wishes he was, he's mysterious. We only get to see the assassin when we invade his world with Yura, and there is only one item set that references him, his cosplay gear. With such little information, he makes a prime candidate for Elden Ring's most enigmatic Tarnished, making him perfect for some lore hunting. In our investigation, we will find connections between this evil Batman and some obscure death lore, things like the Erdtree's Past, the Eclipse, the Helfen, and of course, the Deathbirds. Ravenmount here, more than most modern day furries or convention goers, desperately wants to be a Deathbird, and we'll explore that and all his other ties in this video. If this kind of lore sleuthing is your thing, feel free to subscribe to the channel, especially since most of you watching my videos keep coming back for more, but you aren't subscribed. Pressing that button helps support the channel quite a lot, and if you're coming back to the channel regularly anyways, it makes that easier. With that, let's delve as deep as we can into the lore of Elden Ring's spookiest Tarnished, the Assassin of Ravenmount.
Guy dresses up like a bat. Clearly has issues.
Despite sounding like a Hogwarts rival school to Raya Lucaria, the Ravenmount Order is not something we find in-game. There is just the one assassin, and considering we invade his world at the main Academy gate, maybe there is some animosity between the Academy of Mages and the Assassin School. Either that or Darth Batman is just a relentless PvPer who, like most players, uses the main gate as a makeshift arena. Because we invade him with Yura, Hunter of Bloody Fingers, we know that that's what Ravenmount is, a Bloody Finger. And from Zuli's NPC unmasking video, we get to see that he even has a Mogwin Dynasty tattoo on his forehead, showing some allegiance to the Bloodlord. But as evidenced by the name, the Ravenmount assassin has a different master. We also see it in his clothing and fighting style, but we get to read about it explicitly from his armor, the Raptor set. Whereas the boots and greaves are just the base bandit gear, characteristic Elden Ring asset reuse, the chest piece and mask offer some lore. The sick, plumy cloak is the Raptor's black feathers, and it reads, "Robe crafted with the black feathers of a bird of prey, worn by the assassins of Ravenmount. A ritual implement for transforming into a Deathbird, if only by imitation. Strengthens jump attacks. We are birds of prey, bringers of death." We see from this that, despite Fextra's claims of a singular assassin named Ravenmount, there is actually some group or order of these fellows, and we learn from the Claw Talisman that the assassins of Ravenmount are killers by trade. They assail their victims while dressed as birds of prey. So it is a group whose assassinations form some basis of work. But as even the talisman notes, it is not just work, because they really don't need to dress up like birds to kill people. No, there is something more, as seen from their desire to imitate and become the Deathbirds. It seems the assassins revere these creatures, and they kill as part of their emulation of the birds. We see in the Ash of War they use, the Raptor of the Mists, that they succeed in this to some degree. It reads, "Duck into a low stance, momentarily vanishing. If an enemy attack connects, avian wings will allow for a quick escape into the air." The assassins have their own ritual in which they embody a Deathbird, gaining some bird-like power through the process. We learn a little bit more about the act from their headpiece, the Skeletal Mask, which reads, "Skeletal mask that tightly grips the face, worn by the assassins of Ravenmount. This ritual implement relentlessly digs into the wearer's face, preserving one's human instincts while dressed in imitation of the Deathbirds. Perhaps their ritual turns them somewhat feral or mindless, like that of an animal or a bird. The mask then keeps them sane and of somewhat sound mind, likely through the intense pain of it, digging into their face. This allows them to remember their mission of death, in which they utilize the Raptor Talons, their claw-like weapon of choice. It reads, "Wielded by the assassins of Ravenmount, this weapon allows them to imitate the attacks of Deathbirds. Besides excelling at airborne attacks, its charge attack mimics the vicious swoop of a bird of prey." With nearly every object referencing the imitation, we can't go any further without discussing the object of the Ravenmount obsession, the Deathbirds. There was a lot to talk about with these birds and their powered up brethren, the Death Rite birds. Smotown recently did a great video on them and their Ghost Flame, which I highly recommend you check out. I'll give the summarized version here. We read from Explosive Ghost Flame that it is a sorcery of the servants of death. In the time when there was no Erdtree, death was burned in Ghost Flame. Deathbirds were the keepers of that fire. And we read from Death's Poker that it is a barbed rod carried by Deathbirds. The birds are graveyard fire keepers. It is said that they rake out the ashen remains of the dead from their kilns, starting to sound a bit like the opening of Dark Souls 3. So the Deathbirds are a kind of force of death from before the time of the Erdtree. They are keepers of the ghost flame, a fire with a bitterly cold bite that was used in times of old to burn the dead. The ghost flame torch tells us how the fallen hawks were able to acquire ghost flame by burning the bones of their comrades. So all in all, it is a signature of primeval death in the lands between. Before there was the Erd tree with its own practice of death and non-death really, the Deathbirds oversaw the process through their use of the ghost flame, something that can rise out of dead bones and burn death, playing a role in helping the spirits of the dead move along. With the Erd tree's ascendance, the Deathbirds have been sidelined and kicked out of their role as death servants. Now they are only revered by the assassins of Ravenmount, or the one remaining assassin, who wants to revitalize the practice of the Deathbirds and their ritual. The name of the Death Rite birds, the more powerful of the two kinds, and a few items reveal the ritual behind the ghost flame and the rite of death. The death ritual spear reads, "Ritual spear used by priests of old who were permitted to come among the Deathbirds." The priests became guardians of the birds through the rite of death, which also serves as an oath sworn to their distant resurrection. These priests can be seen in the wings of the Death Rite birds, giving them power and waiting for a future resurrection. Here, death is described as a rite, telling us of a ritual the Deathbirds partook in as keepers of the ghost flame. There are also the feathered branch swords, red and blue, which state that they were once used in ancient death rituals, furthering the reality of some ritual that it seems to me the Ravenmounts are trying to revitalize. Each branch sword also has a unique description, with the red saying, "The heart sings when one draws close to death, and a glorious end awaits those who cling so tenaciously to life." The blue says, "The heart sings when one draws close to death, and thus does one cling so tenaciously to life, to render up a death worth offering." Both states of clinging to life and being close to death would occur during the invasions of the assassins, so they read to me as further evidence that the goal of Ravenmount is to rekindle the ancient death ritual. But as I said, check out Smo for a more in-depth Deathbird look, since there's more unique to the assassins that I want to cover here. Unfortunately, we don't get much further info from our 20-second fight with them, so let's look around where we find their armor, the Sage's Cave, to find quite a few morsels of lore. First, there is a Black Knife assassin who drops the Concealing Veil, which makes you invisible while crouching. These are thematically like our subject, hidden assassins and all, but there don't seem to be any tangible connections. If you know of any, dear viewer, let me know in the comments. However, there is another boss in the cave, Necromancer Garrus, a man wearing the Sage set and the cave's namesake. The set tells us that it is attire of the wise sages who were deemed heretical, evidence that the wearer was driven from town. We can see why Garrus was exiled in his name and his weapon, family heads. The description of the bulbs at the end of the flail reads, "The heads were made to resemble those of his wife and 2 children." And even more, the weapon's unique skill, Familial Rancor, reads, "Gently rattle the copper heads to summon vengeful spirits that chase down foes. The anguish of a spouse and children invites accursed wrath." And between the Rancor name and the visual design of the tack, we can see that it uses ghost flame. While I don't know of any more specific connections to the Ravenmounts, it makes sense that Garrus, a practitioner of ghost flame, would have some association. Birds of a feather, am I right? But there's one more connection in the cave, and it really opens up a big can of worms. In a chest, we can come across the Candle Tree wooden shield, an ostensibly plain shield. But all is not as it seems. The shield's design and description reveal a more sinister side. It reads, "A tall, medium-sized wooden shield, light for its size and easy to handle." Thought to represent a surreptitious prophecy of cardinal sin, the lit candle tree design was forbidden. The white color and blue background may mean to evoke the ghost flame, but beyond that, the implications of what this shield might depict are varied, and they require us to look at a few other obscure lore elements about death in the lands between. Fortunately, our great community of lore hunters has already done much of the legwork. The Tarnished Archaeologist has a video on the potential first burning of the Erd Tree, Crunchy has a video on the Helfin, and vLimit has one on the Eclipse. I'll look at each of these ideas in turn because they're all candidates for the Candle Tree's depiction. First, the design is described as a surreptitious prophecy of cardinal sin, and the only other thing that gets referred to in-game as a cardinal sin is the burning of the Erd Tree, which gets the special distinction of first cardinal sin. When we burn the Erd Tree in-game, it burns red with the flame of ruin. This is also referred to as a prophecy by a few flame incantations. But from the evidence shown in the Tarnished Archaeologist video, it seems like the Erd Tree already burned once before. Ash fills the capital city of Leyndell when we first arrive, and the houses are sealed with wax, likely to prevent this ash from getting in. The gold visage of the Erd tree also covers a small husk of what may be the original tree pre-arson. You can check out TA's video for even more evidence of this kind. Perhaps the Erd tree was once burned with ghost flame. The Deathbirds could have attacked the tree to try to stave off its conquest, trying to hold on to their role and ritual of death. This is large speculation to be sure, but it would provide further context for the Ravenmount assassins to oppose the Erd tree and hunt down the Tarnished who are led by its grace. So burning Erd tree is candidate 1. Next, we have a more picture-perfect depiction. Instead of symbolically looking like an Erd tree, perhaps the Candle Tree shield is depicting something tangible we come across in-game. Candle trees we can find around the lands between. We find these as interaction points to meet an old codger who will very slowly show you to a cave or something otherwise cool. Their visual design and coloring make them look quite like the shield. But if this is the case, then how do we explain the item description? Well, we know that the light connects us with the spirit, so there's a connection to death. And we might see a further connection if we explore the Helfin, an obscurity covered well by Crunchy in his video on the topic. The Helfin is referenced by one item only, the Helfin Steeple, which just so happens to be dropped by a Tibia Mariner in the mountaintop of the Giants right next to a Deathrite bird. Its description reads, "Greatsword patterned after the black steeple of the Helfin, the lampwood which guides the dead of the spirit world. The lamplight is similar to Grace in appearance, only it is said that it can only be seen by those who met their death in battle." The terms lampwood and lamplight make me think of something not too different from the candle trees, which serve some guide the dead purpose. As noted by some user I forget the name of in the Elden Ring Discord, we Tarnished have met our deaths in battle, so that explains why we can see them. But to reel it back in a bit, the candle trees only have candles, no proper lamps like those we can find on the Tibia Mariners. And Crunchy concludes that these candle trees are not the lampwood because they are not colored black, which the Helfin Steeple is stated to be. These are fair issues to bring up that may complicate the picture, but I think the connections we see to the Deathrite birds and the Ravenmount assassins could strengthen the case. Perhaps the steeple is black, but the candle trees don't appear to be because we are not dead in a spirit world or dependent on them for guidance. If these trees were the lampwood, then the Helfin and the guidance of the dead could be tied to the ritual of the Deathbirds. Then, the Ravenmount assassins' efforts would be related as well since they are trying to revitalize the Deathbird ritual. In any case, the Helfin is an interesting and enigmatic section of Elden Ring's lore, and you should really check out Crunchy's video to learn more and see why I am probably wrong with this speculation. Now, there is one more possibility, and this works off the candle trees too, but instead of the ethereal ones and the Helfin, we're going to look at real ones and the failed eclipse. As I said, VLimit has a great video on the eclipse, so feel free to watch that for some extra context. We can find a real example of our candle trees in Elphael. I don't know how you pronounce Elphael. It's the same model, but it's a real tangible item here, and we can even find some statues of Miquella holding a candelabra of similar design. In his video, VLimit charts a connection between Miquella, Godwyn, and the eclipse. Most explicitly, there is a spirit in Castle Sol who says, "Lord Miquella, forgive me. The sun has not been swallowed. Our prayers were lacking. Your comrade remains soulless. I will never set my eyes upon it now. Your divine Haligtree." VLimit explains a lot about what the eclipse is and what it entails, but for our purposes it's enough to say that it was something hoped for by Miquella to bring about some proper death of Godwyn and other unnamed demigods. We see that he had such a desire from the golden epitaph, which reads, "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." The prophecy of Cardinal Sin could be a reference to the eclipse because there are lots of connections. The walking mausoleums may be designed to avoid the fate of Godwyn, and the skulls on their feet reveal ghost flame. The Mausoleum Knights have connection with the Deathbirds. Their armor reads, "The wing-shaped ornaments on its back evoke the Deathbird, a self-inflicted curse that ties the spirits of these loyal knights to the land, having willingly beheaded themselves so that they may serve their masters in death." The eclipse may have allowed Godwyn and the unnamed demigods to properly die, and that in turn might have constituted a return of the old death rite. For a bit of extra speculation here, there is also the sacrificial axe, which reads, "Hatchet used in ancient sacrificial rite. A deathbird is depicted as a malevolent deity. The power of the rite yet lingers. A small amount of FP is restored upon slaying a foe." Firstly, the depiction of the deathbird here seems to be of an alive bird, so maybe long ago the deathbirds were normal looking birds, not the decrepit skeletons we find them in game. But more importantly, this axe could have been what was used to sever the heads of the Mausoleum Knights and the soulless demigods. This is speculation, but considering that the axe was used in some beheadings long ago, maybe in the rite of death for the Deathbird priests, and how it says that some of its power still lingers, I could see it being used for a more recent death ritual too. So as the upshot of this Eclipse connection, perhaps the Ravenmount assassins have some allegiance with Miquella. Maybe if they were a mightier force, we would have seen them in-game as a group aiding Miquella in attempts to usher in the Eclipse, in effort to restore the status and rights of the Deathbirds. If that were the case, there would be one more question we'd have to ask. Since they bear a tattoo of Mohg, do they know what Mohg has done to Miquella? Though they might not care, seeing Miquella as a tool to achieve the ends of the Deathbirds, the only thing they really seem to care about. Which of these theories might be true, some of them, all of them, or none of them, is hard to say for certain, unsurprisingly for lore in this game. Feel free to let me know in the comments which seems most likely to you, and be sure to say if there are any relevant death connections I missed. What we can definitely say is that the world of death seems to often go against the Erdtree, not surprising when its order sealed away destined death. The Ravenmount assassin we find at Raya Lucaria is okay with that heresy, and probably most others considering he has a Mohg tattoo on his face. At the end, it's too bad we never see him actually invade anything, not to mention any other members of his assassin order going around the lands between, cacawing in the Deathbird imitation. With that, we have covered, I think, what there is to say about the lone Ravenmount assassin that we see for like 25 seconds in-game. Did a pretty good job of stretching that out. If you have enjoyed the video, then consider subscribing to the channel, or becoming a patron on Patreon. I'll be doing more lore and more spooky deep dives up until Halloween. My poll showed interest in the Halloween hands of Raya Lucaria, so I'll cover them to some degree next. I hope you enjoyed the video, and a final thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.